She looked at me at the airport, surrounded by her glamorous friends, and told me I was an embarrassment. So I let her go. And while she was living a fake life for her followers in Europe, I spent 3 weeks quietly and methodically erasing her from my very real one. By the time her plane landed, she was homeless. My ex-girlfriend, Rosie, and I lived in two different realities. My reality is built on things you can touch, things that are solid and true. Wood, steel, code that works. Hers is built on filters, hashtags, and the curated approval of strangers on a screen. For the first year and a half of our relationship, this was a quirky, almost charming contrast. But that all changed 6 months ago when she quit her perfectly good marketing job to chase the dream of being a full-time influencer. We struck a deal, a pact that, in retrospect, was the beginning of the end. I agreed to cover all the major bills, the mortgage on my house, the utilities, the car payments, for a 6-month trial period. It was meant to be a financial runway for her to launch her brand. Her savings, she assured me, will be used exclusively for her business expenses, camera gear, marketing software. I saw it as a short-term, calculated risk. I was investing in the woman I loved, giving her a chance to pursue her passion. I was not, however, signing up to be the silent, uncredited executive producer of The Rosie Show for the rest of my life. Almost immediately, the lines began to blur. Her business expenses started looking suspiciously like designer shopping sprees and extravagant brunches. The packages that arrived daily weren't for a business. They were for a lifestyle she wasn't earning. Our partnership began to feel less like a team and more like a tiered system where I was the financial foundation and she was the star who lived on the top floor, rarely looking down. The cracks in our foundation started to show, not in loud arguments, but in quiet, cutting remarks. Little comments about how my life, my hobbies, my friends weren't very aspirational. The way she began speaking to me not as a partner, but as an assistant. Can you grab my ring light? Make sure you get my good angle. I need you to be quiet for the next hour. I'm filming. This 3-week trip to Europe, a whirlwind tour of photogenic locations with her influencer friends, was meant to be her grand finale. It was the last big content push before the 6-month trial was up, the moment she would have to start pulling her own weight again. The incident at the airport wasn't the first sign that our relationship was broken, but it was the one that shattered it beyond repair. I drove her to the airport, a task that involved loading 3 ridiculously oversized and overweight suitcases into the back of the luxury SUV that I paid for. As we walked toward the check-in counter, she spotted her friends, Lauren and Ashley. They were a vision of curated perfection, dressed in outfits that belonged on a Milan runway, not in a cramped economy seat for a 10-hour flight. They glanced over at me in my comfortable jeans and hoodie, my standard uniform for a life not lived on camera, and I saw it. A quick, shared look of faint, almost imperceptible disgust. Rosie stopped dead. She turned to face me, and the look in her eyes wasn't one of love or a sad goodbye. It was pure, unadulterated panic. "Okay, this is good," she said, her voice a sharp, urgent whisper. I was confused. "What are you talking about?" "I'll walk with you to the security gate." She let out a sigh that was pure theater, a sound of immense frustration, as if I had just proposed something utterly barbaric. Her eyes darted over to her friends, who were now pretending to be engrossed in their phones, then back to me. "Don't walk with me," she said, her voice low and laced with steel. "You'll embarrass me in front of my friends." And there it was. The final, brutal truth laid bare under the sterile fluorescent lights of the airport terminal. In her world, I wasn't her loving partner, the man who supported her dreams, the one she would miss for 3 weeks. I was a liability, a potential embarrassment to be managed, a smudge on the perfect, filtered image she was so desperate to project. I glanced past her and saw Lauren and Ashley, no longer pretending, smirking in our direction. They had heard. In that single, crystalline moment, our entire 2-year relationship replayed in my mind, but this time the filter was gone. Every dismissive comment, every time I felt more like a prop than a person, every moment I was pushed to the background so her life could take center stage, It all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The love I had for her didn't fade or die. It was extinguished. Instantly. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. A strange, serene calm washed over me. It felt almost like joy. I looked at her perfectly contoured face and anxious eyes, and I simply nodded. "You're right," I said, my voice steady and polite. "I wouldn't want to do that." I released my grip on the luggage cart, letting it roll a few inches toward her. "Have a great trip," I said, and then I turned around and walked away. I didn't look back. I could feel her stunned silence behind me. She was expecting a scene, a dramatic fight she could later spin into content about the struggles of being a woman with a less than supportive partner. She got nothing. All she got was the sight of my back as I walked out of the terminal, out of her life, getting smaller and smaller until I disappeared. As I stepped out into the cool morning air, I pulled out my phone. She was going to be gone for 3 weeks. That was more than enough time to change everything. Rosie was about to get the ultimate rebrand, whether she wanted it or not. And her ride home definitely wasn't going to be me. The drive home from the airport was the most focused and productive hour of my life. The hurt, emotional part of me, the part that felt the sting of her words, wanted to go home and just start piling her mountain of clothes and makeup on the front lawn. But the practical, methodical part of me, the builder, the designer, knew this required precision. This wasn't going to be a messy demolition. It was going to be a deliberate, systematic disassembly of a life that was no longer welcome in my own. My first stop was the dealership. The luxury SUV she so loved to be seen in, the one that was a key prop in her successful influencer narrative, was entirely in my name. I walked in, found the same sales manager I'd bought it from, and told him I had an almost new, low-mileage vehicle I wanted to sell back. He was surprised but recognized a good deal. By the time the afternoon sun was slanting through the showroom windows, the paperwork was signed, the keys were on his desk, and a substantial check was in my hand. Phase 1 was complete. When I arrived home, the silence of the house was deafening. It was my house, but it was filled with her presence. Her aesthetic was everywhere. The minimalist, uncomfortable couch she'd insisted on, the generic art on the walls, the endless trinkets and products that cluttered every surface. Her clothes had colonized 80% of the closet space. An entire spare bedroom, my old workshop, had been transformed into her filming studio, a chaotic shrine to ring lights, fast fashion, and the pursuit of online fame. It was a monument to her, and it had to go. I didn't want to just pack her things. That felt too respectful. I wanted to perform an exorcism. I called a high-end service that specialized in estate clear-outs and deep cleaning. I was brutally honest with the manager on the phone. I told him I wanted every single item in the house that did not belong to me removed. I wanted the closets emptied, the bathroom stripped of its hundreds of bottles and jars, and the spare bedroom completely gutted. After the removal, I wanted the entire house deep cleaned until it smelled like nothing but potential. He quoted me a price. I told him I'd pay double if the entire operation could be completed by the end of the next day. Money, it turns out, is a powerful motivator. While the crew in matching jumpsuits efficiently and impersonally erased her from my physical space, I turned my attention to our digital one. I logged into every shared account, Netflix, Spotify, Amazon Prime, and change of passwords. I went through my credit card and bank accounts online, methodically removing her as an authorized user from every single one. Then, I tackled the crown jewel, her influencer website. I had the login credentials from when I'd helped her set it up. Deleting it would have been too easy, too merciful. Instead, I navigated to the back end and quietly changed the administrative contact email and the recovery phone number. I changed them to my own. I was now the silent, sole owner of her digital brand. By the following evening, the transformation was complete. The house was pristine, empty, and blessedly quiet. The crew had been magnificent, a whirlwind of ruthless efficiency. Every trace of her was gone. The spare bedroom, once a testament to her cluttered ambition, was now just an empty room, a blank canvas. But an empty house is just a building. So I went shopping. I bought a new couch, a big, deep, comfortable one you could actually sink into. I went to my storage unit and retrieved the solid oak coffee table I had built with my own hands years ago, the one that had been banished because it didn't fit her aesthetic. I bought a bigger TV and a proper sound system. I started converting the now empty spare bedroom back into what it was always meant to be, a home gym on one side and a workshop for my design projects on the other. I build real, tangible things for a living, and I was finally reclaiming the space to do it in my own home. Over the next 2 weeks, I didn't just redecorate, I rebuilt my life. I called friends I hadn't seen in months, friends Rosie had dismissed as boring or unambitious. I went hiking in the mountains, something I loved that she detested because there was no point if you can't get a good picture. I went to a baseball game and ate a hot dog without worrying about the caloric content. I did all the small, simple, real things that had been pushed aside because they weren't photogenic enough. I received a few texts from her during her trip. They were breezy and self-absorbed. A picture of her posing in front of the Eiffel Tower, a video of her eating pasta in Rome, captioned, "Living my best life." She never once asked how I was doing. She was performing for an audience of one, and it clearly wasn't me. I didn't reply to a single one. The final piece of the plan was executed a few days before her scheduled return. I took a portion of the check from the car sale and booked a trip for myself, a 2-week solo motorcycle tour through the national parks out west. It was a dream trip I'd put on hold for years because Rosie hated camping and thought motorcycles were tacky. My flight was booked for the morning of the day she was set to arrive. The day before her plane was due to land, I sat down on my computer and composed a single, final email. The subject line read, "Important information regarding your return." The body of the email was short, professional, and devoid of emotion. "Rosie, as per your request at the airport, I have made arrangements to no longer be a part of your life. To that end, please be advised of the following. All of your personal belongings have been professionally packed and moved to a secure storage facility. The address is 123 Storage Way, Unit 42. Your access code is 1234. The first month's rent has been prepaid. The vehicle you were driving has been sold, as it was my property. You will need to arrange your own transportation. The locks on the house have been changed. You're no longer a resident at this address. I trust this provides you with the independence and freedom from embarrassment you desire. I will be traveling for the next few weeks and will be unreachable. I wish you the best in your future endeavors. Tom." I hit send. Then I powered down my phone, zipped up my duffel bag, and got ready to catch my own flight. She wanted to be the star of her own show. I had just canceled her funding, dismantled her set, and locked the doors to the theater. She was on her own. I was somewhere deep in the breathtaking silence of Zion National Park, 5 days into my trip, when I decided to turn my phone back on. The digital explosion that greeted me was more spectacular than I could have possibly imagined. It was a glorious, multi-platform symphony of pure, unadulterated panic. I had hundreds of notifications, a cascade of missed calls from Rosie, from her friends, from her parents. Voicemails that the transcription service had converted into frantic, often incoherent strings of text. And the emails, so many emails. My best friend, Dave, had agreed to be my eyes and ears on the ground, and a long text from him laid out the beautiful, chaotic play-by-play. Rosie's flight had landed on schedule. She had, as predicted, waited at the arrival's curb for over an hour, tapping her foot impatiently, fully expecting me to be there, ready to haul her luggage and chauffeur her home. When I failed to appear, she apparently had a full-blown, public tantrum right there on the sidewalk, much to the amusement of the airport staff. Eventually, she was forced to take a ludicrously expensive taxi back to my house. The cab driver, according to a neighbor who relayed the story to Dave, had to help her wrestle her 3 behemoth suitcases onto the curb before she paid him. He drove away just as she was confidently inserting her key into the front door lock. The moment of dawning horror when the key failed to turn was, by all accounts, a masterpiece of silent film acting. She was stranded on the porch of a house she no longer had access to, surrounded by 300 pounds of European content. Her first move, of course, was to call me. Over and over. When that failed, she called her entourage. Lauren and Ashley, the very friends for whom I was such an embarrassment, were suddenly and tragically super busy. Neither, it turned out, owned a car large enough to accommodate her luggage, and their tiny city apartments had no room for a refugee and her mountain of designer bags. The final, humiliating call was to her parents, who had to drive 2 hours from their comfortable suburb to rescue their stranded daughter. Dave said the scene on my front lawn, as described by my neighbors, was pure comedic gold. Her father was yelling into his phone, her mother was weeping dramatically, and Rosie was just sitting on one of her suitcases, staring blankly at the front door of the life she had been so carelessly evicted from. The social media smear campaign began that very night. It was a coordinated attack from Rosie, Lauren, and Ashley, all posting tearful, vaguely worded stories about the dark side of relationships, about toxic masculinity, and how I had cruelly and suddenly abandoned Rosie, leaving her homeless. They were trying to paint me as a villain, a monster, but they underestimated me. Before I'd left, I'd sent a short, private message to a few of our key mutual friends. I didn't give details. I simply said that Rosie and I had broken up, and that some things had been said that made it clear we were on fundamentally different paths in life. I just asked them to reserve judgment. It worked. When the smear campaign launched, it fizzled. People were skeptical. The story of what she had actually said to me at the airport had already begun to circulate. Her carefully crafted narrative of being the blameless, heartbroken victim simply wasn't sticking. But the most satisfying part of my revenge was digital. Remember how I had taken administrative control of her website? While I was enjoying the majestic views of the Grand Canyon, I had made one tiny surgical change. I had deleted her entire portfolio, all the filtered photos, the blog posts, the brand collaborations. I replaced it all with a single, high-resolution image, a photo of the itemized receipt from the junk removal and cleaning service, with the grand total circled in bright red. Underneath the image, I added one line of text in a clean, professional font, brand undergoing a strategic realignment. Please check back for updates. Dave told me one of her few remaining brand partners saw it and sent her a screenshot. Her entire online identity, her business, her whole curated persona had been reduced to a bill for having her stuff hauled away like trash. She had a complete public meltdown on Instagram Live before taking the entire site offline. The legal threats arrived a week later. A sternly worded letter from a high-priced law firm, demanding I restore her access to the house and provide immediate financial support. My lawyer, a man who lives for this kind of drama, sent back a beautiful response. It included a copy of the house deed in my name only, a copy of the car title in my name only, and a meticulously detailed invoice for her half of all shared living expenses for the past 6 months, a sum that dwarfed any potential palimony claim she could ever hope to make. The letter concluded with the polite suggestion that should she wish to pursue the matter in court, we would be delighted to file a counterclaim for the substantial amount of money she owed me. The legal threats stopped. The social media posts stopped. The frantic calls stopped. All that remained was a profound, deeply satisfying silence. It's been 4 months since I returned from that soul-cleansing motorcycle trip. The quiet in my life has been the greatest reward. My house is finally my own again, filled with furniture I've built, art I love, and a complete and total absence of drama. The story of Rosie's dramatic return and the subsequent, rapid implosion of her influencer life became something of a cautionary tale among our old friend group. I heard through the grapevine that her parents had to rent a moving truck to empty the storage unit, a very tense and unhappy family affair by all accounts. She's now living back in her childhood bedroom. Her influencer career, the very thing she sacrificed our relationship for, is dead. A brand built on a lifestyle funded by someone else is a house of cards, and I had simply walked away, taking the foundation with me. Without my bank account to fund the trips, the designer clothes, and the photogenic meals, she had no content. Her social media feed, once a vibrant stream of manufactured glamour, is now a sad collection of recycled old photos and vague, inspirational quotes about new beginnings. Even her loyal friends, Lauren and Ashley, have abandoned her. Apparently, their friendship was as transactional as our relationship. Once Rosie was no longer a source of free trips and fancy dinners, and instead became a financial and emotional burden. They quickly lost interest. I had one final indirect contact with her a month ago. A mutual acquaintance, a guy who owns an art gallery downtown, called me. "Tom," he said, "I'm calling about something weird. Rosie was in my gallery yesterday. She was trying to sell me some of the old furniture from your house, claiming she's an interior designer now." I had to laugh. "Did you buy any of it?" I asked. "Are you kidding?" he scoffed. "It was all that cheap, mass-produced stuff with no soul." I told her it was worthless. She got really upset, started going on about how you ruined her life, ruined her career. He paused for a moment. "For what it's worth, man," he said, "you dodged a bullet. A big, expensive, poorly decorated bullet. And that, right there, is the entire story. She saw me as a utility, an accessory to the life she wanted to project. My purpose was to stand just out of frame, silent and supportive, so I wouldn't ruin her perfect shot. What she never grasped was that I wasn't just in the background. I was the one who had built the stage, wired the lights, and paid for the electricity. And when the foundation walks away, the whole pretty, fake house comes crashing down. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just free. I'm planning another trip for the fall. I'm building new things for my house, solid, real things that will last. I'm living a life that doesn't need to be documented to be enjoyed." She made her choice that day at the airport. She chose the image over the person. And in the end, the image was all she had left, a blurry, fading picture of a life that was never really hers to begin with.